Chapter 16, Yao family. Chen Xiang was standing above the immortal and devil cliff. He had put away his vermilion bird fire wings. To transform true qi into wings required a very high-grade technique. He practiced the Tai Chi divine exercise which, of course, included these types of martial techniques. As Chen Xiang arrived at the top of the immortal and devil cliff, he heard sounds of fighting coming from below. Although the distance was quite far away, he was able to hear it clearly through his divine sense. Chen Xiang immediately started to fly towards it. If it was just an ordinary battle, he wouldn't pay the slightest attention, but the sounds of fighting were deafening and created large impacts. Chen Xiang deduced from this that it was no ordinary martial battle. Chen Xiang flew silently through the air, arriving before a forest clearing. There he saw two handsome teenagers against 5 black-robed assailants. The two seemed rather frail, but their strength was satisfactory. They were matching the 5 black-robed people's knife techniques, but their true qi was not potent enough. If they continued to delay, they would certainly end up being killed by the 5 black-robed people. It seems to be the Shui family imaginary sword technique, where the aura illuminating from the sword produces illusions, making it difficult to distinguish between opponents. Chen Xiang read various martial art books in his lifetime, and could instantly identify the sword style with just a glance. After learning they were Shui family members, Chen Xiang could not idly sit by. After all, Shui Xianxian was his fiancée. Additionally, the Chen and Shui families had a close relationship. "Watch out!" Chen Xiang shouted. His body seemed like an azure rainbow as he flew towards the commotion. His hand transformed into a dragon's claw as it headed straight towards the head of a black-robed man. He roared at the same moment as an azure true qi wave gushed out from inside his mouth, covering the black-robed man. Along with the azure dragon roar, Chen Xiang's azure dragon claw grasped the head of the black-robed man. In an instant, the black-robed man's skull shattered into shards of bone and flesh. This sudden scene of insane brute force stunned the remaining 4 black-robed men and the 2 Shui family members. The true qi that was embodied with the majesty of the azure dragon caused their hearts to be shocked from fear. Of course, the most shocking thing to them was the martial technique that they had never seen before. After Chen Xiang broke the skull of the black-robed man, the dragon claw immediately transformed back into a fist striking towards another black-robed man. In an instant, he struck dozens of times, forming after images like the wind. They were sent whistling towards the astonished black-robed man. The blows pounded onto his body and after the strike, emitted a series of explosions. This was the storm-killing fist. Chen Xiang's true qi was now much more potent, and so casting storm-killing fist was quite simple and easy. He did not have to worry about the consumption of true qi, and each fist's explosive power was phenomenal. It was quite difficult to resist, not to mention the fact that he could instantly use this technique multiple times. With a moment of effort, Chen Xiang had defeated another black-robed man. After that display, the 2 Shui family teenagers finally reacted and continued to attack with their swords. After Chen Xiang had joined the fight, the remaining black-robed men began to retreat after witnessing their 2 defeats. They were soon beaten and seriously injured, and they did not expect this type of result. "Thanks a lot for the rescue, esteemed senior brother," one slightly tall teenager said while cupping his fist. "This one is called little brother Xueming. Xuez Hailang." The other teenager said while cupping his fist, "Thanks a lot for coming to the rescue, great brother." Although Chen Xiang was only 16 years old, he was very big and tall, so he looked relatively more mature. "No need to be so polite, I am called Chen Xiang. Our Chen and Shui family have had a friendship for many generations, so this is a must." Chen Xiang also replied with courtesy. This caused Xueming and Xuez Hailang's countenance to change. They had not expected their savior to be Chen Xiang. Chen Xiang was quite famous in the Shui family because their beloved daughter of the heavens, Shui Xianxian, was Chen Xiang's fiancée. However, many juniors of the Shui family were not in favor of Chen Xiang because they knew Chen Xiang does not have a martial practitioner's spiritual vein. They were thus amazed at Chen Xiang's display of strength. "Are you really Chen Xiang?" Xueming found it somewhat hard to believe. Chen Xiang, while nodding and smiling, said, "Of course, you two should be here to attend our Chen family's banquet, right?" Ming and Haileng nodded their heads. Although they were uncertain, they did not question Chen Xiang anymore. After all, it would be impolite. This person was their savior. What is the origin of these people? Why were they trying to assassinate you? Chen Xiang looked at the three injured black-robed men on the ground. Ming said, they are killers from an unknown organization. Their strength should be at the 5th level of the mortal martial realm. We met them on the way. Ming and Haileng beheaded the remaining 3. They did not uncover anything from their possessions, and they also did not intend to interrogate them. Since these assassins were specially trained, they would not open their mouth even in death. Great Brother Chen, you should have entered the 6th level of the mortal martial realm. Otherwise, you could not have easily killed those 2 black-robed men. Ming thought about Chen Xiang's sudden rush and how he killed the 2 black-robed men instantly. One could not help but feel chills run down their spine. They respected Chen Xiang because although they were much older than him, he was still stronger than them. Chen Xiang nodded with a smile, I just broke through. Chen released true qi flames and incinerated the corpses. This made Ming and Haileng slightly surprised. True qi flames was an alchemical flame. This time, they understood why Chen Xiang had the courage to accept the challenge of the Yao family genius. Haileng had an ashamed look on his face as he spoke, Great Brother Chen, I really did not think that you had concealed your strength all this time. Before I used to always looked down upon you, please forgive me. Chen Xiang shook his head and said with a smile, no problem, after all, strength comes first in this world. Right, is Xianxian coming to attend the banquet? Ming smiled and said, she is the cause of the challenge between you and Yao family genius, how can she not come? No wonder this little girl only has Great Brother Chen in her heart and so much confidence in her choice. Chen Xiang was speechless. He did not think that Xianxian would truly pass on his challenge to the Yao family genius. Initially, he had indeed said it, but he had not thought that it would arrive this quickly. Great Brother Chen, that Yao family genius is very cunning. Although you are strong, the challenge is issued by him, so he will definitely compete in alchemy. His strength is probably also not weak, it has always been a mystery. Ming said. Haileng nodded and added, I've seen that guy, he is very arrogant. Previously he was invited to our Shui family, and he was already looking at little sister Xianxian and did not pay any attention to other people. However, his alchemy is splendid, thus the patriarch and elders endured him. Therefore, they want to match Xianxian and that guy in a marriage. Chen Xiang had already heard about the Yao family genius. He was known to be very arrogant and proud, but many people thought it was natural considering he was one of the youngest alchemists. In front was the hustling and bustling Wohu city. Chen Xiang and Ming noticed in the distance a team of horses gradually moving towards Wohu city. This team of horses and carriages was very grand, a total of 5 luxurious horse carriages, and each was being towed by 8 steeds, but one carriage team had a man riding a horse who looked imposing and cold. His whole face teemed with slaughter qi, and with one look one could easily tell that he was a bodyguard. Yes, Yao family members are really extraordinary. Chen Xiang said as he saw the big Yao symbol on the horse carriage while those bodyguards' luxurious clothing also had the Yao insignia on it. The Yao family style had always been high profile. You 3, quickly report your name. Otherwise, we will deal with you as murderers. Suddenly a fierce shout came from the carriage team. This made Chen Xiang and Ming unpleased. At that instant, just after their reply, a long two-edged sword came like an arrow out of the blue. On top of it, vigorous true qi was seen, and it was flying precisely towards Chen Xiang. Chapter 17, Martial Arts Sect. Chen Xiang quickly took a few steps, his hand similar to a dragon's claw. It shot out like lightning, firmly grasped the flying sword, and suddenly a powerful qi exploded. While blocking the true qi from the sword, Chen Xiang's arm was the only thing that slightly moved. He stood firmly and steadily like a mountain. Chen Xiang coldly said, I am Chen Xiang, a Chen family member. Who are you? Quickly report your name or else I will treat you as killers. This declaration made Ming and Haileng's hearts tremble. Chen Xiang was clearly being provocative towards the Yao family carriage. It should be known that the Yao family had sent many experts to protect their family genius. Just that flying sword alone was enough to make their guts tighten. If it were them standing there instead of Chen Xiang, they would certainly not be able to block that sword. Brother Xiang. During the silence between both sides, a sweet and gentle shout came from inside the carriage. Suddenly a slender silhouette came flying out with staggering speed. Without good eyesight, one simply would not be able to catch the person's appearance. However, Chen Xiang could clearly tell that it was Xue Xianxian. Her Qinggong had reached a high degree of proficiency. Even Chen Xiang could not help but gasp in surprise. TLN, Qinggong Chinese martial technique for dodging and movement. Xue Xianxian's movement seemed like she was only skimming the ground. In one breath she treaded 100 feet and arrived in front of Chen Xiang and the others. With a charming smile she said, "Xiaoqi, Xiaobie, you are also here." Xueming and Xue Zhailan both snorted, as Xueming said, "Little girl, you should not call us like that in front of outsiders. Otherwise, how are we supposed to show our faces in public?" Xue Xianxian stuck her tongue out and then laughed tenderly, revealing 2 little dimples on her sweet and tender cheeks. It was a beautiful and hair-trending expression. Chen Xiang couldn't help but squeeze Xue Xianxian's beautiful face and with a laugh said, "How can you be together with your husband's enemies? Just now, I was almost killed by that group of people." Xue Xianxian furrowed her nose, laughing softly, "I know Brother Xiang is very formidable. That sword was thrown by a Yao family elder." Chen Xiang recalled that the previous Truchi explosion was indeed quite frightening. Its power was at least in the 7th level of the mortal martial realm. However, he practiced all 5 elements of Truchi so he could easily best it. The Yao family's carriage stopped as several people stepped down from the horse carriage. It seemed like they were waiting for Chen Xiang to step aside. "Brother Xiang, we should move," Xue Xianxian softly said. "No. It is not necessary." Chen Xiang looked coldly at the carriage team while remembering the ruthlessly thrown sword, and in his heart he was furious. That was because if it were an ordinary person, then they would have died unjustly. "Chen family Jr., come and salute the Yao family elder." A person waiting near the carriage shouted. "I'm not going to salute someone who just tried to kill me. Furthermore, there is not a single rule in my Chen family which directs me to salute a Yao family elder." Chen Xiang replied coldly. Xueming and Xue Zhiliang suddenly admired Chen Xiang. He dared not only to contradict a Yao family member, but did so in the presence of a Yao family elder. Humph, a good-for-nothing showing arrogance. "We will continue on our way." Ironically, a voice full of arrogance was heard. It sounded very weak, yet still reached Chen Xiang's ear, which showed that this man's strength was quite good. After all, they were separated by at least 100 feet. Xue Xianxian's eyebrows wrinkled. While softly snorting, she held onto Chen Xiang's arm and whispered, "Don't mind him." Chen Xiang sneered. He tightly gripped the sword that was thrown just a moment ago and poured his Truchi into it before throwing the sword towards that distant carriage team. Azure Truchi enveloped the sword. It flew and pierced the middle carriage wheel while discharging an azure light, which was followed by an explosion that shattered the whole wheel. But since the luxurious carriage had 4 wheels, it remained stable. Xueming, Xue Zhailang, and Xue Xianxian were dumbfounded. They did not expect Chen Xiang to repeatedly provoke the Yao family members. They also felt extremely shocked regarding the sword throw from Chen Xiang. The formidable strength put into it was actually comparable with the sword that was formerly thrown by the Yao family elder a moment earlier. "Sorry. I just returned the sword, yet no one was there to receive it," Chen Xiang faintly said. However, his voice was transmitted in all 4 directions and was filled with provocation. "You're courting death." Yao Tianhua angrily shouted, yet he did not follow suit. It seemed as if he was being blocked. The carriage team continued onward as if nothing had happened. "My father is still inside the carriage, I have to accompany him. I probably won't have the opportunity to stay beside him in the future," Xue Xianxian said with a distressed tone. Her beautiful face revealed a somewhat anxious expression. Chen Xiang caressed her hair while softly speaking, "Go." Xue Xianxian dashed away. Chen Xiang thoughtfully looked at her departing back and asked, why would she not have the opportunity to accompany her father in the future? Xueming spoke with a furrowed brow. Big brother Chen, have you heard about those martial arts sects inside the Immortal Mountains? This little girl will probably be fancied by those martial arts sects and enroll in one of them. The number of powerful martial experts in the sects were as plentiful as the clouds in the sky. Many martial artists aspired their whole life to go there, but the best time to go would be during childhood. If you want to enter those sects, it's best to apply after advancing to the 9th level of the mortal martial realm, otherwise you would not be able to properly accompany her. Sumi Yao suddenly said. Chen Xiang had a strong desire to enter those sects. After all, once he was there, he would be able to experience the strength of much more formidable martial artists. The spirit chi was also rich there, which would allow him to display the full potential of his yin and yang divine vein. Chen Xiang, with Xueming and Xuez Hailang, entered Wohu City. The Xue family had some shops inside, so they turned down Chen Xiang's invitation to accompany him into the Chen family villa. The Chen family villa was quite lively inside. There were only 3 days until the banquet. Chen Xiang quickly greeted his father before returning to his own residence. My current cultivation is at the 6th level of the mortal martial realm. I think I can now start to refine middle-grade mortal level dans. Chen Xiang looked at the 2 beautiful girls who were drinking fragrant tea. Ba Yuyu said, although I am not an alchemist, I know that the materials required to refine mortal level dans are very expensive. If you want to refine them, you also need to spend a large amount of spirit coins. Sumi Yao lightly sipped the tea with a smile, saying, that is not a problem. Don't you have the Hell Spirit Grass, and the 1000-year Blood Spirit Grass? If these 2 spirit herbs were sold, that would be enough for the supply cost. Chen Xiang had obviously not forgotten that he had these 2 precious spirit herbs. He smiled and asked elder sisters, don't you have any treasuries with you? Currently, I do not have any suitable weapons on me. Sumi Yao sighed. My magic storage weapon was taken away by the enemy. Fortunately, I was able to conceal one storage ring, but it only has some clothes inside, nothing more. While speaking on this matter, Ba Yuyu's elegant and beautiful face was filled with anger as she accidentally crushed the teacup. Chen Xiang could easily tell that there was a lot of good things inside that magical storage weapon. You practice the divine exercise of 4 symbols. The most suitable weapons for you to use are the 4 beasts divine weapons, but these are not easy to find, because each one is a divine weapon. Sumi Yao's words made Chen Xiang feel slightly excited. Chapter 18, First Confrontation. Divine Weapons? Weapons used by gods? Wouldn't it clearly be very powerful? Furthermore, there were even 4 in total. But listening to the previous statements, these 4 beasts' divine weapons were extremely special and even ethereal. Ba Yuyu said these 4 beasts' divine weapons were born with the divine exercise of 4 symbols. Our teacher only got the divine exercise of 4 symbols while the actual divine weapons were lost with no trace. It is said that only someone who practices the divine exercise of 4 symbols can even hope to gain the recognition of the 4 beasts' divine weapons. Sumi Yao spread her hands and said, although I practice the divine exercise of 4 symbols, I have no intention of ever finding those 4 beasts' divine weapons. I'm simply not interested. Chen Xiang and the 2 girls chatted for quite some time. From these discussions, he learned a lot about the world of martial arts. Chen Xiang took 10,000 spirit coins from Chen Tianhu and arrived in a hurry at Spirit Dan Hall. He wanted to seize the time to refine a middle-grade mortal level Dan. This was not only to defeat the Yao family genius, but also to help him quickly elevate his strength. What? The price was actually raised by 3-fold. Chen Xiang, standing near the counter, knitted his eyebrows together while looking at the Spirit Dan Hall's lord. The Spirit Dan Hall's lord caressed his beard and said, this is the stated price. If you have any questions, you can ask the owner. Spirit Dan Hall's owner. This was the first time Chen Xiang even heard of someone like him. In the past, was it not what the Hall Lord said that counted? Starting today, as long as a Chen family member is the one to buy any dans, it will be 5 times the price. At this time, an arrogant voice was heard. Chen Xiang knew that this voice belonged to Yao Tianhua. The Spirit Dan Hall was unexpectedly purchased by the Yao family. The Spirit Dan Hall suddenly became quiet. Everyone was silently looking at the teenager who was walking down the stairs. He was quite handsome with fair skin. He wore luxurious golden attire, and behind him were two old men with sharp gazes. His pair of eyes were full of pride. Glancing at everyone, his line of sight finally stopped to rest on Chen Xiang. This teenager was the Yao family genius, Yao Tianhua. Inside Wohu City, Dans were only sold at Spirit Dan Hall. They had the final say on their prices. Buying them or not was all up to the individual. Now that Spirit Dan Hall was controlled by the Yao family, the jealousy and hatred of Yao Tianhua seeped towards Chen Xiang and definitely played a part in the new attitude towards the Chen family. You are buying the herbs to refine a baptizing marrow Dan. Moreover, the seedlings. What, are you going to refine them? Yao Tianhua said with a face full of disdain. So what? Could it be in this world you are the only one who can become an alchemist? Chen Xiang sneered. I heard that you can release decent true qi flames, but that doesn't mean you could use them for alchemy is awfully picky when it comes to flames. If a poor ruffian like you could refine pills, then the world would not have so little alchemists. Yao Tianhua sneered in reply. In Chen Xiang's mind flashed one thought. He just thought of an ingenious plan. While laughing he said, Yao family genius, this poor ruffian does indeed, truly understand alchemy. How about we make a bet, well, assuming you dare to bet with me, that is. Yao Tianhua suddenly laughed. You understand alchemy? You should not be refining Dans through bragging. Good, good, good. What do you want to be? I will accompany you until the end. Looking at the fish that just took the bait, Chen Xiang felt happy in his heart as he took out a blood-red spirit grass. This spirit grass is around the size of a plate and released a bizarre kind of smell. This was the 1,000-year-old blood spirit grass that he won from Chen Hehai. After this blood spirit grass was put forth, everyone in Spirit Dan Hall could not help but change their expression. Even Yao Tianhua's face was filled with surprise. He was a Yao family junior and could with one glance recognize that this blood spirit grass was at least 1,000 years old. This was a very expensive spirit herb, and as a result had no set market price. I would like to bet this 1,000-year-old blood spirit grass. Can this young master of the Yao family afford to bet with me? Chen Xiang said with a faint smile, as long as I can refine a pill, I win. Opposingly, if I am not able to refine one, I lose. Simple as that, how is it? Do you dare to bet with me? Looking at Chen Xiang's appearance, it was as if bringing out the incomparably precious 1,000-year-old spirit grass was simply not valuable based on how casually he brought it out. Yao Tianhua had a very arrogant nature, being extremely concerned about face. In any case, he would definitely not reject the bet, but the betting stakes were simply too high this time. Although he was the Yao family genius and carried along a large amount of money, but he was still unable to compare it with this blood spirit grass. Chen Xiang actually carried around 1,000-year blood spirit grass. This made many people hold him in high esteem. No one even dared to have any thought of robbing him. After all, in Wohu City, the Chen family was very respected. Currently, Chen Xiang's father was the Chen family patriarch. Chen Xiang's status could only be imagined by looking at the 1,000-year-old blood spirit grass. After seeing Yao Tianhua's complexion become extremely ugly, Chen Xiang felt good inside his heart. He pointed at the top of a small piece of the 1,000-year-old blood spirit grass and said, Young Master Yao has only come to Wohu City for the first time, so you didn't know I was just joking with you. Let's bet this small piece. If I win, you just have to give me 3 sets of mature herbs required to refine a baptizing marrow Dan. A fingernail-size section of that blood spirit grass was more than enough to exchange for 3 sets of baptizing marrow Dan ingredients. Yao Tianhua's complexion became a lot better as he heaves a heavy sigh of relief in his heart, replying, No problem, let's begin. After Chen Xiang retrieved the blood spirit grass, he immediately took out his inferior alchemy furnace and let the Spirit Dan Hall's lord examine it. After confirming there was no issues with the furnace, Chen Xiang took out some herbs and began to process them. At this time, everyone was intently watching Chen Xiang. Everyone who came here, more or less, yearned to become an alchemist, and actually witnessing the process of alchemy was a somewhat rare occasion for them. No one was against watching the various processes of alchemy, not to mention if it was a teenager that was the one doing it. True Qi flames poured out from Chen Xiang. The spirit Dan Hall's lord's old face was filled with regret from Chen Xiang's refusal to become his apprentice. Upon seeing the flames, he knew that this was the flame best suited for alchemy. After seeing the flames, Yao Tianhua could not help but frown as his complexion became very grim. He cursed in his heart, "Damn brat, he has been hiding his abilities well." Watching Chen Xiang's skilled motions and calm look, Yao Tianhua secretly gritted his teeth. He had determined that Chen Xiang had a certain amount of experience in regards to alchemy, furthermore it was no worse than his. Chen Xiang was definitely the most adept in refining a quenching body dan. This pill was not only easy to refine, but required very little herbs. If one also had good control of their flames, they could refine many pills at once. When the crowd witnessed the relaxed expression on Chen Xiang's face, they were amazed. They had never seen someone refining dans so leisurely before. Unknowingly, an hour passed by. After watching Chen Xiang's slightly serious complexion vanish, everyone knew that Chen Xiang had passed the most crucial step of refinement. Done. Chen Xiang opened the lid of his alchemy furnace. Overflowing herbal fragrance drifted inside the hall. Everyone came and crowded around the furnace while staring inside. They all saw white mist slowly winding around 5 snow-white pills. The crowd sucked in a deep breath. Chen Xiang had actually refined the quenching body dan. The spirit Dan Hall's lord's face froze. Seeing those 5 quenching body dans in front of him was hard to believe. He was also an alchemist, so he was able to clearly distinguish the quality of these quenching body dans from their color and aroma. Yet because it was of a superior quality and refined in only a short period of time, furthermore from this inferior quality alchemy furnace, most people could not accept the fact that this was refined by a 16-year-old. Chapter 19, Baptizing Marrow. Dan Yao Tianhua's fair and handsome face started to turn ugly. His face muscles were slightly twitching. He was also shocked by Chen Xiang's alchemy technique. He had not thought that there was another young alchemist in this world that was on par with him. Chen Xiang placed the 5 quenching body dans on his palm. Like eating candies, he popped them into his mouth. While smiling he said to Yao Tianhua, "Now, can you please give me those herbs for the baptizing marrow dan?" Watching Chen Xiang causally eating the freshly refined quenching body dans, the corners of everyone's mouth started twitching as they cursed Chen Xiang's prodigal skills. They wished they could ruthlessly trample him with their feet. Treating dans like snacks dealt an extremely heavy blow to them. Do all alchemists usually treat dans like candies? Chen Xiang placed the 5 quenching body dan on his palm. Like eating candies, he puts them in his mouth, and while smiling, he said to Yao Tianhua, "Now you can give me those herbs for baptizing marrow dan." Spirit Dan Hall's lord's 2 hands were shivering as he gave 3 sets of herbs to Chen Xiang. Wearing a look of surprise, he asked, "You aren't going to try and refine a baptizing marrow dan, are you?" Chen Xiang scratched his head. There's a first time for everything, and they're not always bad things. Your spirit Dan Hall is now selling these dans at such an expensive price, so I can only resort to refining my own dans. Chen Xiang received the herbs and turned around to leave. He turned his head back when he reached the door and said to Yao Tianhua, "Young Master Yao, a few days later the time of our alchemy competition will arrive. At that time, I hope that you will be able to raise the gambling stakes and actually bet with me. Since it is a competition, it should have a little more flair and fun. At that time, I will also raise the stakes. If you are unable to match them, you don't need to show up and compete with me." Chen Xiang left with his mischievous words residing in the hall. Everyone inside Spirit Dan Hall suddenly began discussing about his terms. 1,000-year-old blood spirit grass as a bet was able to scare even heaven, much less man, and he still wanted to raise the bet. TLN, too exaggerating, smiley face. Yao Tianhua coldly snorted with anger before he headed upstairs. Inside Spirit Dan Hall, its lord murmured, "Impossible. He is only 16 years old. It would be impossible for him to refine a baptizing marrow dan, Chen Xiang's mood was extremely good from getting the 3 sets of baptizing marrow dan ingredients for free. Soon he would be able to refine the baptizing marrow dan. Little devil, do not turn the boat in a trench. It's better to be careful. Sumi Yao reminded him. Compared to other things, alchemy is really boring. You should just go and chop him up into pieces. Bai Yuyu's chilling voice came. Hearing this statement, Chen Xiang could not help but shiver. He knew that Bai Yuyu was a peerless she-devil lord that was practicing devil exercises. Suddenly he doesn't want to practice Bai Yuyu's devil exercise anymore. Chen Xiang returned to the Chen family villa. He inquired Chen Tianhe and learned that both Xue Xianxian and her father were staying as a guest in the city lord's villa. Furthermore, many other families from Wohu City were frequently paying them a visit. It must be known that Xue Xiangxian's father was someone with many connections. Chen Xiang arrived at the secret underground stone room. To refine the baptizing marrow dan he first needed to concentrate and could not be bothered. Opening the package, Sumi Yao fiddled with the herbs in her exuberant smooth fingers and nodded with satisfaction. 50-year-old blood ginseng, 50-year-old spirit leaf grass, profound elemental fruit, and yang fire flower. The quality of these 4 herbs are pretty good. As for the rest of them, they are of ordinary quality but would not affect the refinement of the baptizing marrow dan. Chen Xiang picked up a white fruit that was the size of a walnut and picked up a small flower that resembled a sunflower. These were the profound elemental fruit and yang fire flower respectively. Their prices were very expensive as they took dozens of years to mature. Sumi Yao and Bai Yuyu did not want to stay all day inside the ring, so whenever they got the chance they would come out. At the same time, they often chatted with Chen Xiang, which helped keeping them from feeling too bored. Chen Xiang also liked it when both stunning beauties would emerge from time to time. After all, they were very beautiful and their just appearances would make people feel pleasant and happy. Accompanying these 2 beauties was a very wonderful opportunity. Sister Miyao, if I use the dragon saliva exercise to mature the herbs for the baptizing marrow dan, how long do you think it would take? Asked Chen Xiang. He knew that the herbs for the baptizing marrow dan required them to be at least dozens of years old. Sumi Yao rolled her pretty eyes and said, it will probably take 10 days. You are now at the 6th level of the mortal martial realm, you can now use more of the dragon saliva exercise abilities. Only 10 days to mature spirit herbs by dozens of years. This made Chen Xiang pretty surprised. Sumi Yao said, begin refining now. While refining the baptizing marrow dan, you need to pay attention to 2 main points. First, because more herbs are required to make the dan and each herb has different levels of flame resistance, you need to control your flames extremely accurately to make sure you don't burn some of the auxiliary herbs. Second, when it becomes time to solidify and congeal the pill, you need to make sure you have comprehended the essence of the pill at that time. Chen Xiang tried to remember each and every word. Then he turned towards the not-so-far elegant beauty, asking, Sister Yuyu, can you please return to the inside of the ring? The cold qi emitted from your body will affect my control over my flames. Bai Yuyu's complexion immediately turned even more cold, causing Chen Xiang to hastily say, Sister Yuyu, you are extremely beautiful. If it wasn't a last resort, there would be no way I would want a stunning beauty like you to return to the inside of a ring. Sumi Yao heard this and laughed over and over. Beautiful senior sister, don't scare this little guy. Let him refine his dan in peace. A humph sound could be heard from Bai Yuyu before she returned to the ring. Chen Xiang started to refine the baptizing marrow dan, which is a middle-grade mortal level dan. 1 pill could be sold for 5,000 spirit coins. Since spirit dan hall's prices were now increased, it could probably be sold for 10,000 spirit coins, which was equivalent to 1 million small spirit coins. After placing the herbs inside the furnace, Chen Xiang released his flames, simultaneously controlling the flames and temperature inside the alchemy furnace. The temperature of each region varied slightly in order to bake those herbs at the optimal temperature and completely release their respective spirit qi. The herbs required for the baptizing marrow dan were not easy to use. Chen Xiang spent more than 1 hour before he could grasp the characteristics of each of the herbs and identify their degree of fire resistance. At this time, a colorful spirit qi was drifting inside the furnace. This spirit qi was released by those spirit herbs during their baking through the true flames. These were the main ingredients in the creation of spirit dans. The herbs were slowly transforming into herbal powder. Chen Xiang's divine sense was slowly wrapping around the herbal powder. At this moment, as long as this herbal powder and the released herbal qi were fused, he would be able to successfully congeal the dan. Everything started off well, but at the final step Chen Xiang was sweating. This herbal qi was very brutal in nature, making it very difficult to fuse different types of them together. No wonder divine sense is a requirement before refining the baptizing marrow dan. These spirit herbs herbal qi are very difficult to control. Chen Xiang thought while adhering. He then concentrated his spirit and released even more divine sense, forcing these colorful herbal qis to fuse together. At least they started to turn into a black spirit qi and started to fuse with the gray herbal powder. I must be successful and endure. Chen Xiang's heart only had this one thought. The herbal powder and herbal qi were gradually fusing, but he felt as if his divine sense was not powerful enough to successfully congeal them into pills. Chapter 20. A prodigious talent. Chen Xiang watched as the herbal powders mixed and were about to congeal into a dan. Bang! A horrid sound spread through the air and a rapid qi wave burst out from the alchemic furnace. Chen Xiang quickly retreated and glared at the fallen lid with a stunned face and sweat dripping down his back. That damn furnace exploded. Are you okay? Sumi Yao asked with a slight disregard as she combed her hair. I'm all right, replied Chen Xiang, trying to catch his breath. When he had somewhat calmed down, he inspected his alchemic furnace to check for any damages. Surprisingly, it was fine. Sumi Yao's lips spread into a slight smile as said encouragingly, then continue. It's common for such a thing to happen. Seeing Sumi Yao's fascinating and charming smile, the sense of failure in Chen Xiang's mind was swept away. Having calmed down, he took a few moments of rest and then brought out more herbs. 1, 2, and 3 hours passed, and once again Chen Xiang arrived at the last step only to fail. Fortunately, the furnace had not exploded like the last time. Chen Xiang sighed and said, "This is too difficult to refine. There are only one set of herbs remaining, which means that I only have one more chance left to succeed." Looking at the sweat on Chen Xiang's furrowed face, Sumi Yao came up to him. With a damp towel, she wiped it off and said, "Little one, this sister here, during her time of refining the baptizing marrow dan exploded several alchemic furnaces. You are doing well at the rate you're going. According to my estimation, for you to be successful, it would probably take you at least another 20 more tries." Staring into Sumi Yao's bewitching eyes, Chen Xiang became flustered. The allure of her beauty made his heart throb, and at that moment, his mind could not help but think of her naked image burned in his mind. What? 20 times? That won't do. I do not have that much money to spend, Chen Xiang said. He shook his head, trying to stay focused and clear those disturbing images floating in his mind. As if reading Chen Xiang's mind, Sumi Yao played cutely and shook her bosom a little. "Little guy, you going off into wild flights of fantasy has nothing to do with me, but if your thoughts wander towards senior sister, you will probably be out of luck." A sudden thought of an elegant and beautiful Bai Yuyu, filled with a bloodthirsty and cruel qi, one rod of slaughter, came to Chen Xiang's mind, and he laughed. He felt silly and did not dare to take another glance at the giggling soft bosom of Sumi Yao again. A proud smile bloomed on Sumi Yao's face. After that, Chen Xiang took more than an hour of rest. In the meantime, he listened to Sumi Yao's narration of her experience in refining the baptizing marrow dan. When Chen Xiang had fully rested, he once again attempted to refine it, only, this time, it was twice as quick. After about an hour and a half, he was at the last stage of solidifying the dan. Sumi Yao's eyes glittered as she watched. In her opinion, it would have been impossible for Chen Xiang to refine the baptizing marrow dan so quickly, but it was successful. Thus, Sumi Yao could not help but feel admiration towards the boy's alchemic talent. At that moment, she could see an amazing and diverse future for Chen Xiang, more than she had ever expected to live herself. "Senior sister, our divine veins were not passed on to the wrong person. This man has not disappointed us, Sumi Yao transmitted to Bai Yuyu inside of the ring using her divine sense. This is merely better than the most. Bai Yuyu said in a cold voice, but Sumi Yao could sense a trace of a rare smile. A moment later, Chen Xiang opened his eyes. Filled with excitement, he propped the lid of the furnace open. After seeing what's inside, he looked towards Sumi Yao in excitement. Sister Miyao, I did it. I refined the baptizing marrow dan. Bai Yuyu came out from inside the ring. At that moment, like Sumi Yao, her eyes gleamed with surprise and joy. They had pinned all of their hopes on Chen Xiang, and after seeing his level of inherent talent, they couldn't help but be happy. Ordinarily, 3 baptizing marrow dans could be refined at the same time. Chen Xiang was only able to refine 2 dans, but it had taken him only a day to successfully refine them. Such a thing can only be done by someone of great talent. Chen Xiang's actions showed he not only had the ability, but an unusual perception that could detect the subtle changes during the dan congealing process. After a few tries, with such a perception, Chen Xiang was able to become attuned with what was necessary to succeed. Sumi Yao ruffled Chen Xiang's hair, her alluring eyes locked onto him as she smiled and said, "Good brat, you did not disappoint me." Hearing Sumi Yao, Bai Yuyu nodded in agreement. The cold look in her eyes had softened considerably. Watching the 2 stunning beauties praising him, and with such closeness, Chen Xiang's heart was filled with pride. But although he was successful this time, it did not mean that he would succeed every time. Not allowing his pride to dampen his resolution, he went to refine a few more dans before he left the underground private room. Just as he left, a girl wearing a purple skirt, sitting in the small hall, came into his view. She had a noble air about her and looked absolutely stunning. For a moment, Chen Xiang's mind went blank as he asked in a confused voice, "Xian Xian, why are you here?" Shui Xian Xian looked at Chen Xiang and said, "What? Can't I come to find you? Well, you are an adult. So you should be the one to look after me, right? Why am I the one who is always coming for you? Humph. After all, this will just make me a joke in front of others." Chen Xiang scratched his head in embarrassment. He had honestly wanted to go to find Shui Xian Xian, but he first wanted to practice his alchemy. He sauntered to Shui Xian Xian and brushed his hand against her face. The girl's face turned bright red as she blushed. "Shui Xian Xian, I'm truly sorry. I have been busy with my alchemy. Please, take this as my apology." Chen Xiang took out a small box containing 2 black dans. There were the same baptizing marrow dans he had just refined. Shui Xian Xian opened the box and said with a soft shout, "Baptizing marrow dan. Did Xiao Xiang brother refine it?" Chen Xiang smiled and said, "I only managed to refine them due to luck. I do not have any more raw materials now, and was just preparing to buy more, but the Spirit Dan Hall now belongs to the Yao family. If I were to buy from them, I would have to pay several times that of the market price. Xian Xian, can you help me buy some of these herbs?" Shui Xian Xian bent her head in serious thought. Her demeanor and her face became stern as she said in a serious voice, "Certainty, but Xiao Xiang brother, you can refine baptizing marrow dan at this age. This is simply too astonishing." Shui Xian Xian then brought her voice level to a whisper and continued, "Xiao Xiang brother, you can later enter those martial arts sects and can most likely reach the pinnacle of martial arts." Chen Xiang nodded and said, "I plan to, but presently I do not have enough strength." "Xian Xian, did some sect come to recruit you?" The girl sighed and answered, "It is not a sect, but a person. She has received our Shui family's grace, and she fancies me and wants me to be her apprentice. She seems to be a member of some martial arts sect, but she did not specifically mention about its identity. I will follow her, and soon." Shui Xian Xian stopped herself in dismay. "It does not matter. It is the goal of every martial artist, and sooner or later, I will go as well," said Chen Xiang as he took out a 10,000 spirit coin bill and gave it to Shui Xian Xian. Taking the bill from Chen Xiang, Shui Xian Xian said, "Baptizing marrow dan is of no use to me now, so I will help you sell it in exchange for the herbs you need, Xiao Xiang brother. Wait for me, I will be back quickly." After Shui Xian Xian left, Chen Xiang hurriedly took a bath. Just as he finished, Xue Xianxian returned with a mature and charming white-robed lady with her. If Chen Xiang had previously not encountered Bai Yuyu and Sumi Yao, he would have been easily smitten by the lady. This middle-aged beauty coming with Xue Xianxian had an oval face that was clear of any makeup. Her skin was pale and tender, and unexpectedly, she was in no way inferior to Xue Xianxian. With a smile on her face, she looked at Chen Xiang with her phoenix-like eyes, and her graceful figure exuded an imposing manner. Along with the power coursing in those eyes of hers, she could easily have been mistaken as an aloof goddess with an Armageddon might.